Welcome to This Explainer. So today we're unpacking a truly bizarre, honestly almost game show-like psychological experiment that's going to completely change how you think about your own self-control. Picture this, okay? A foldable yoga mat, a multi-plug power strip with individual switches, and a smartphone charger. Now, I know it sounds like the start of a terrible DIY tutorial, but this setup is actually a carefully designed psychological trap. We're looking at a fascinating behavioral test that uses these completely everyday objects to expose the fragile reality of human discipline.
Okay, let's dive into this. I want you to ask yourself, honestly, do you think you have the mental fortitude to survive this seemingly trivial challenge? It's 5 minutes. That's it. Just sitting there and not flipping a switch. I mean, most of us would immediately say, of course I can, it's just 5 minutes, right? We pride ourselves on having total control over our actions. But as we're about to see from the source material, this simple piece of plastic and a ticking clock are literally enough to break the vast majority of people.
Here's the exact setup, and the rules are deceptively simple. The participant just sits or lies on the mat. The power strip is placed right at the edge, all switches set to off. Rule 1, you absolutely cannot leave the mat. Not a single finger toe or stray hair can cross that boundary. Rule 2, you cannot flip any of the switches to on. And Rule 3, you can squirm, stand up, or roll around all you want as long as you stay within the confines of the mat. Sounds almost too easy, doesn't it?
But here is where the psychological torture really begins. The researchers introduced what they called temptation devices to slowly, deliberately turn up the pressure. At the 1-minute mark, an assistant casually mentions, "Hey, should I plug in the charger? Your phone battery's at 5%. Instant panic sets in. At 2 minutes, if the participant looks hot, a small fan is turned on just out of their reach. Minute 3 brings a bribe. Just flip one switch and I'll give you a snack. Minute 4, quit right now and you get immediate coffee and chocolate. And finally, at minute 5, the ultimate pressure cooker. The researcher bluffs. Actually, this was a lie detector test. The tension just ramps up second by second.
Section 1. Hilarious coping methods by type.
Literally just 60 seconds into the experiment, the cracks start to show. First up, we have the rationalizer. Faced with this overwhelming, burning urge to just do something, this participant tries to bend the very fabric of reality. They actually ask the researchers to validate a mental flip. It's incredibly funny, but it shows how quickly our brains try to negotiate with our environment when we feel restricted, desperately seeking a loophole to relieve the tension without technically breaking the rules.
And this brilliantly illustrates how deep the mental gymnastics can really go. By the 3.5-minute mark, we meet the philosopher. Rather than just sitting there, the participant actually resorts to deep existential pondering. They try to redefine the entire concept of the experiment just to distract themselves from a piece of plastic. By intellectualizing the urge, they're trying to mentally detach themselves from the physical discomfort of the restriction.
And right at the finish line, at that 5-minute mark, we see the absolute breakdown of human resolve with the innovative quitter. This person actually wraps themselves up like a burrito inside the foldable yoga mat, claiming a legal loophole that since the mat is folded, they are technically no longer on it. It's pure comedic gold, but it perfectly highlights the incredible lengths we will go to escape an uncomfortable, perfectly constrained environment.
Now, what's really interesting about this is how it completely flips everything we just laughed about into serious behavioral science. Listen to this failure rate. 80 to 85% of participants fail this test. Let that sink in for a second. For all our talk about discipline, focus, and drive, nearly 9 out of 10 people cannot sit on a mat for 5 minutes without breaking a trivial rule. Only 15 to 20% actually succeed. So what exactly separates that tiny sliver of winners from the massive chunk of losers?
Section 2. The crucial difference between success and failure.
So, the people who actually succeeded here, they weren't necessarily these mental giants or productivity gurus. They just had very specific traits. They were naturally cold or calm, they had a really high tolerance for profound boredom, they were physically insensitive to things like the texture of the mat or the temperature of the room, and, importantly, they had a rebellious streak. Meaning, if you tell them not to press a switch, they refuse to press it out of sheer spite. Contrast that with the failures. They were highly curious, hypersensitive to physical discomfort, and had low behavioral inhibition, which closely mirrors ADHD-like tendencies. Their brains were simply wired to engage with their surroundings.
So the crucial point is this. Passing this test had absolutely zero to do with what we traditionally call willpower. If you failed, you weren't weak. If you succeeded, you weren't inherently stronger.
The entire concept of pushing through by sheer mental grit is exposed here as a massive illusion.
The source material summarizes this beautifully, calling it an accidental chemistry of your environment and temperament. The winners of this challenge just happened to have an innate biological disposition that perfectly matched a boring, physically restrictive environment on that specific day. Think about it. If you're naturally insensitive to your physical surroundings and you don't really mind staring at a blank wall, sitting on a yoga mat for 5 minutes isn't an exercise in willpower, it's just a regular Tuesday.
Let's move to and see how this builds when we actually change the variables. The researchers noted that if you just slightly tweak the environment, the winners and losers completely swap places. No way, right? Imagine a cold version where an ice pack is placed on the mat and pressing the switch removes it. Or a sound version where the switch beeps terribly until you press it. Or a reverse version where it's a frantic speed test to turn on as many switches as possible in 1 minute. Suddenly, those highly curious, sensitive, hyperactive people who failed the first test would absolutely dominate, while the calm, rebellious, slow-to-act participants would fail miserably.
Which brings us to our final absolutely critical takeaway. If willpower is largely a myth, an illusion created when your natural temperament accidentally aligns perfectly with your surroundings, why are we still trying to force ourselves through sheer effort? Instead of fighting your innate nature, stop and look at the yoga mats and power strips in your own life. How can you proactively redesign your environment right now so that doing the right thing doesn't require any willpower at all? Think about that as you go about your day. Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and I'll see you in the next one.